I guess to start, I'll just have everyone introduce themselves. As she mentioned, I'm Jacquelyn Melinek. I'm a senior crypto reporter at TechCrunch. But if you want to go first.
Sure. Hey everyone, thanks for having me. My name's Tekin Salimi. I've been a general partner at Polychain Capital for the last 4 years, but actually just announced yesterday the launch of our new fund. It's called DAO 5. The idea behind DAO 5 is actually pretty simple. We're a seed stage crypto fund that's going to convert entirely into a DAO in the future. So what that means is we're going to spend the next few years investing the dry powder of the fund, and then once enough of the protocols we've invested in launch and are liquid trading tokens, we're going to dissolve the fund entities entirely, take the GP assets, and roll those into an on-chain treasury that's governed by the DAO 5 token holders. So tokens will be issued, obviously, to the investment team and the shareholders of the fund, but most importantly, every founder we back out of the fund is going to receive a governance token grant as well. So the whole thing is a bit of an experiment in how to bootstrap a new DAO by using a venture fund model as a way to kind of onboard founders as this decentralized collective. It's a bit of an open experiment, but I'm excited to see what happens.
That's so exciting. My name is Sarah Wood. I am the head of operations at Upstream, which is a no-code full-stack DAO in a box. Before that, I was the head of community, and before that, I worked at Goldman Sachs. Thank you so much for having us.
And hi, I'm Phil Kelly, based in New York. My background's a mixture of banking and tech. It includes blockchain, AI, security, cloud. Spent 3 years at Consensus. I was the strategy and sales business development leader for the Americas latterly, and just joined O1 Labs. For those who don't know, O1 are specialists in the zero-knowledge proof space. We're focused on recursive ZK snarks, focused currently on privacy use cases, but also with potential for bridges and oracles, and we're a major contributor to MENA. On the privacy side, we're just launching our ZK apps offering now. It's TypeScript-based library to make everyone able to build privacy layers into their apps, into their dApps. So kind of pretty exciting space, nascent. There's tons of really interesting use cases coming out, and had some great conversations at this conference. Last thing I think I should say is I'm here in a personal capacity. I signed up for this before I joined O1 Labs, joined a week ago, so definitely not speaking for them. But I do think there's zero-knowledge use cases and privacy use cases in DAOs and in dApps in general. So thanks for having me.
So I guess to start, obviously DAOs and the technology behind them have been around for a couple of years now, but we're seeing such an emergence and like hype behind DAOs. And I guess the first question is, why now?
I'm happy to start. Yeah, DAOs as an idea and in practice have been around for quite a while, but I really feel that last year was kind of the breakout year where DAOs found mainstream fit and definitely proved their ability to raise capital very efficiently and effectively for narrow causes. So we saw this with Constitution DAO that was kind of in mainstream media and not just in kind of like the crypto web, if you will. We saw this with Assange DAO. These are both instances where these projects were able to raise capital from a decentralized cohort very fast. But what DAOs haven't yet proven is their ability to effectively manage, govern, and make decisions and kind of entice token holders to still participate in governance on an ongoing basis. I think Assange DAO would also be a flip example of kind of community ambiguity and infighting leading to the whole thing really falling apart at some level.
I mean, I agree. I think while the technology has existed from the beginning of time, humans have self-organized, the actual human behavior of a DAO is something that we have been doing since kindergarten. Your first pizza party, you brought in your money, you got a token, you got to make a decision about what type of pizza to order. That behavior has existed for a long time. And so I think it's really exciting to see now that we have the technology for it, how do we keep people involved? How do we, continue to make sure it's fair, it's accessible, it's equitable? And I think there is also this cultural moment where people want credit for their work. And I think that is something that resonates with the idea of a DAO because, traditional company, you are an employee, you participate, you get a salary. But you're also giving, like your personal brand, your network. And I think what's really exciting about the DAO model is that you are going to be able to participate in the upside of all that you are giving to this organization. And so I think that's really exciting. And I think it's, an overarching cultural trend, because humans have always organized. We have always governed ourselves. Community 1.0, we're gathered around location. Community 2.0, we're gathering around our interests through the internet. You're on Reddit, you're on Tumblr. And now it's Community 3.0, and it's, let's get ownership, let's get equity for what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think also, part of to your question about, why all of a sudden are we seeing, DAOs discussed everywhere? I mean, I think part of it is the widening of the definition. So a few years ago, I mean, there were these amazing DAOs founded that are, really pure form, like Maker and Compound, and very, very tightly defined with votes that feed directly into smart contract execution. I think over time, there's been a really, big expansion of the definition of a DAO, at least in common parlance. And that, by the way, I mean, that could be a good thing. But of course, you've now got the, you've got the investment DAOs. You've got some DAOs which really look like user groups, so which is fantastic, of course. I mean, it's really good for engagement. It's really good to get feedback from the community and to allow people to vote on, for example, features of products. But I think there's been this kind of dilution of the definition, and that's one of the things that's led to DAOs being everywhere. Also, I mean, because we're still on the learning curve with DAOs, we've had some pretty high-profile kind of spectacular problems with DAOs, including the great DAOs like Maker and Compound. And we've discovered that for example, hard coding, the delays into upgrading code is a huge problem. If there's an exploit and a weakness that you have to upgrade overnight, and you've got a voting system that requires you to wait for a week. We've had other cases where we've had, exactly as was mentioned earlier, we've had cases where it's been realized after a time that we just don't have a tight definition of what the DAO is trying to achieve, and so there's been, governance issues that then need to be worked through and, are not reflected in the code or even in the kind of, common sense bylaws of the DAO. So I think the learning curve and some of the headline grabbing failures from that have been an influence too.
Before, Sarah, you made a point about participation, and that brought up the idea to me that with DAOs, a lot of times there's so much hype in the beginning, people are excited to join, and then the hype kind of dies down. I felt like with Constitution DAO, after they didn't purchase the Constitution, it kind of died down for a bit, and then they found another purpose. My question for you guys is kind of, how do you continue to encourage participation after the initial excitement?
Sure. So my viewpoint is the DAOs that have gotten this best so far are the ones that have started with a narrow, small, like-minded community and have gradually decentralized and opened up. The best examples of this would probably be something like Pleaser DAO or Friends with Benefits, where Friends with Benefits, I think, was initially like 5 or so co-founders, and today is over 5,000 members. It's not particularly easy to join. Like, you have to go through an application process and be referred and get approved by a subcommittee of the DAO. It's kind of like applying to Soho House or something. But I do think that those DAOs that have started and gradually opened up have done a much better job at keeping people engaged and kind of keeping them interested in kind of the ethos of the DAO, as opposed to starting with hundreds or thousands of members, where there's kind of a tragedy of the commons. And if you have too many members and the token and kind of ownership is too egalitarian, then no one really feels like they have the individual incentive or enough reward to kind of remain participating, and everyone free rides. That's kind of the failure case you want to avoid.
I mean, I completely agree, because I think at the end of the day, a DAO is a community, and communities are built in one-on-one relationships to each other. So no matter how exemplary the technology is, if the community's purpose isn't clearly defined, if the governance isn't clearly defined, if everyone isn't fully on board with what we're doing, how we're going to do it, why we're doing it, and there isn't that human alignment, the community, the DAO, will fail, because it's just an organization of humans. And so I think it's a technology problem, but it's also, it's a human opportunity to make sure that everyone is coming along and that everyone is able to contribute. And so that's where I think it's really interesting as we think about the different ways that people can get ownership into a DAO, different, contribute to participate. More than just pay to play is figuring out other ways to get people involved and other ways to make sure that people can stay involved and that, there aren't financial barriers so that everyone can feel like they are moving the mission of the DAO along.
Yeah, I mean, well, I could potentially answer this point by saying it's just a reality that you're not going to be able to maintain the same level of engagement over time, and it's it can be an issue with apathy, but it can also just be an issue with bandwidth. I mean, the more that people are involved with lots of DAOs, and the more complex the DAO decisions get, and the organizations get, then the harder it's going to be to devote the right level of bandwidth. So I think there's just there's going to be a natural move towards some kind of hierarchy and delegation and specialist groups and pods within DAOs that take on specific tasks, and that's probably I think it's probably an inevitable thing, and you could argue it's a good thing because right now there is some misalignment of skills to votes and interests to votes. So specializing a little bit within the voting power and concentrating it in DAOs, I think is probably a good thing. To the extent you want people to stay individually involved, I mean, there are things that you can do. There's different voting techniques. You can streamline the voting through, holographic consensus. You can, kind of effectively raise the barrier to the kind of things that get voted on, and then allow for, easier votes without quorum. So there's a bunch of techniques you can use there. Kind of being self-interested in the privacy space. I mean, one possibility. I think there's some apathy that happens through members of a DAO seeing the direction the vote is going and then saying, hey, I'm just going to sit back because I can see where this is going. So if you had private voting that prevented people from seeing where things were as an interim step, like happens in national elections, I think that's a potential technique. I think privacy can also be applied, by the way, with sort of permanent privacy of votes, so that people can't buy votes. So I think there's a number of techniques like that, but I do think there's kind of just a natural move towards hierarchy and pods and specialization.
I mean, I think that's a really great point that, not every community needs to be a DAO, and that I think it's really exciting. There's all these different use cases for DAOs. And I also don't know if we've actually found like the perfect use case. And so it's awesome that we're trying all these different things, like let's make a DAO for my book club, like let's make a DAO for XYZ. But they're also, I believe over time, will become a more natural fit of, okay, this actually makes sense. And the amount of time that I'm spending, the amount of money that I'm spending makes sense. Obviously, as the technology evolves, it will also be able to become faster to make decisions, it'll become less expensive with gas fees, all of that. And then I think another interesting, because to think that every single person is going to vote on every single proposal, like to be a truly on-chain DAO, it's also like expensive and it requires a lot from every community member. So at Upstream, we're trying this technology where you'll be able to delegate your votes for like a certain type of proposal. So if you didn't want to vote on every single new member, you could delegate your vote to someone. So I think, and we're just working through it now, and I think there will be a lot of evolution as we, start to fit the technology for human behavior and figuring out like how much do people actually want to be involved, can be involved, and what is this DAO actually being used for?
Yeah, I agree. I think the kind of like liquid democracy style vote delegation will be really helpful to increase governance. I'm also excited about the protocols working on marketplaces for voting rights so that you can kind of just resell, keep the economic right in the DAO, but if you're not going to be interested in active in governance, resell just that voting right for narrow proposals. The other reality is just that as a DAO member today, the tooling in software is very, very limited. Like, it's crazy that I still don't have a single dashboard or software interface that I can go and see all the proposals of all the DAOs I'm in, and through that one mechanism, just make votes in different proposals and kind of be engaged. I just think the basic problem of lack of tooling today is still a limiting factor. And I know we'll probably get into the topic of institutions more entering DAOs, but I do think institutions will actually play an important role in a way of increasing governance participation. Kind of the way you think of proxy advisory firms really molding or influencing retail participation in governance of like public traded companies. I think institutions and crypto funds and other collectives like that will also put out public proposals on what types of things they're going to vote for in different DAO communities. And this will kind of help inform what retail DAO token holders do as well.
My next question was actually about institutional participation. So that was a great transition. I guess going off of that, how do you think as institutions approach and enter the DAO space, how will that change the landscape going forward?
I think you bring up a good point about tooling, and that's what Upstream is working to solve. But I think as institutional money and institutional focus and institutional attention arrives on DAOs, the tooling has to get better, because there will be no tolerance for what it is now, which is people putting things, stitching together a series of platforms. It just doesn't work at scale. And I do think it will be this natural pressure cooker where innovation will happen, because people will start to feel that there's more people entering this space. If everyone, there's that tweet that there's more DAO tooling startups than DAOs. Well, that's good, because competition is where innovation happens. So I think it's actually really exciting, and it will make sure that if we put our attention on it in the right way, that we are actually creating a better, more accessible organization structure than what currently exists. That right now, a lot of the value accretes to the people that are at the top. And so if the institutional focus is there and we are now aware of this sort of technology that we want to build, I think it's actually really exciting, because we will be forced to innovate, and hopefully we will be forced to innovate a solution that's better than what currently exists.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, because if you look at the traditional equity markets, I mean, there is a big industry around shareholders and corporations profiling their equity share bases, and literally segmenting them in the same way as they segment consumers, putting together marketing campaigns, including cold calling equity holders to lobby them for votes or to get their opinions. So it's kind of like a really fully fledged business. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, with anonymous or pseudonymous holdings of tokens, you can't necessarily do that. You could look at on-chain activity to try and profile people a little bit, but there are some limitations. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. And obviously, there's work going on to kind of do householding across chains, for better or worse. So again, maybe you can get a decent way down the track there. Yeah, I mean, also with institutions, I mean, I also think that they will be lobbying to tighten up the tooling and the processes around it. I think there's a ton of work that goes on. I think one of the things with DAOs is that people see a vote and they say, hey, that's amazingly simple and efficient, and it just happens like that. But the reality is there's so much that happens, off-chain before the vote. I mean, that's really where a lot of the magic happens, and I think the institutions will be focused on that. I think they'll also need to focus on really understanding better the legal risks, because there's a ton of uncertainty still.